Today we're looking at a wonderfully popular color called Wild Truffle. This color is awesome to me because it sort of fits within that dark neutral mold that combines versatility with accentuating qualities. It's deep, dark, and rich, but surprisingly usable in a lot of cases, no matter what your interior design style is. Now, of course, we're gonna go into all the ways you can use this in your home, some of the technical details regarding this color, but also I've prepared an entire color palette from Behr paint based around it, so you can use it in your home effectively. Do me a solid and click that like button, and let's get into it. Wild Truffle by Behr Paint is listed as one of their most popular neutral colors, which is kind of surprising considering how dark it is. That's not why we're talking about it today. Not because a lot of people like it, but because it was requested by one of my subscribers, the people that really mattered to me. If you haven't subscribed yet, you still matter to me, just letting you know. But I'm glad it was requested because Wild Truffle is one of those colors that can do quite a bit. It can serve as an accent wall to a much lighter color, especially in the neutral palette, but you could also justify using it in an entire room as well, especially in those rooms that have good lighting or even lighter flooring to sort of bounce some of that nice warm light up. And the reason that I like using it so much is because it is part of that neutral color family. So that just tells me it's going to be versatile and pretty usable in a lot of situations. Before we get into how I use it, let's talk about its technical elements, specifically the LRV, which is the light reflectance value. Very important number to know. Behr Paint does advertise it on their website, unlike Pharaoh and Ball. I love throwing passive-aggressive shade at FNB. Good old Pharaoh and Ball, keeping that LRV information away from us. So Wild Truffle, from 0 to 100, 0 being dark, dark black, and then 100 being the brightest white you'd ever seen, it sits around a 22, which actually is a pretty deep and dark LRV number. And that essentially puts it in the bottom fifth of all paint colors. Definitely a dark color. Its darkness will be especially noticeable when used inside because typically interior lighting pales in comparison to exterior lighting. So just to touch on outside use before we get into the inside, yes, it's a great color to use outside, even if you're going with your main body color. So if you want something that's a bit darker and more rich, and you're tired of the off-whites and the beiges that you might see outside, this is a great candidate because it's going to reflect 22% of the ton of light that the sun gives you. It also feels very balanced as a neutral. It's not going to feel overly greeny. It's not going to have a rosy pinky quality, especially outside, which some browny grays can have if they have that red turned up. This one's not. It's pretty settled. It's also neutral enough that if you want to use it as a trim color to sort of outline your exterior sort of design, it does a good job at doing that when you're working with colors that are much lighter or even kind of in that mid-tone range where you can really see a nice difference. Fantastic garage door color too, if you want something that's impactful but not too overly vibrant and accentuating, because garage doors not really meant to be accentuated in my opinion. Now, because Wild Truffle is so down the middle when it comes to its undertones, not quite red, not quite green, it is very much a shaded, grayed out dark brown. So it's going to be very susceptible to your lighting specifically. It doesn't have enough of any specific color hue to be definitively one or the other. So you're just going to simply have to test this color out in your space. If you're looking for a dark brown that is a little toned down in its saturation in terms of how brown it actually feels, this is a great choice to look at. And I think it's popular for a good reason. That being said, it is darker. So what about all of you that are looking for lighter options? Well, that's where today's color pairings come in, because this whole color palette is loaded with other neutrals that are a little more user-friendly based on how light they are. And then you have one kind of surprise accent color at the end to top things off. So right out the gate, translucent silk is the first color that I would recommend pairing with Wild Truffle, mainly because it's much lighter. It's at a 69 LRV.
Nice.
Which is pretty much on the higher end of the ideal range of colors. So it's not going to feel too dark or too light. Although if you do have a ton of natural light in whatever space you're using it in, then you might start to run into problems where the color might feel a little washed out because there's just an overabundance of light, but not really a problem for a lot of people. This is definitely a good main color option to paint the main parts of your home on the inside. So your front foyer, hallways, those open living dining room areas that you might have, all of those connecting spaces in your home, this could be a great starting point. You might want to differentiate anyway, but very much a safe option in regards to this palette. Another pretty safe option is creamy mushroom, which would go really well with a wild truffle. Truffle oil and mushroom soup. A bit cliche, but still delicious. I picked this color next because it sort of splits the difference between those last two. It's a mid-tone, a true mid-tone right around 52 LRV. So great for those parts of your home that do get a ton of light. You need something a little more substantial so you can see the color, but maybe you don't want to go all the way to a dark color with your wild truffle choice. These three together, all warmer leaning neutrals, definitely more brown based, a touch of a yellow warmth mixed into, very much balanced. But we don't want to be too vanilla with this color palette, right? So sometimes you just gotta break the rules a bit. And that's what Rule Breaker does. This is a color that brings in this richness, this kind of burgundy aspect, but also feels like it has some plum mixed in, kind of a dark wine red color, pretty much a dark earthy red mixed with purple, kind of the way I like to put it. So what's great about it is it still fits within that warmer leaning profile that the other neutrals have, but clearly brings in an interesting vibrancy to it and that hue, that purpley red hue that elevates the whole palette to a nice place. It's also a more interesting alternative to just a clay red or a terracotta or something more orange leaning. This one brings in that purple aspect, which can be a little polarizing. Maybe it's a bit high risk, high reward, but I think it really works nicely with the other neutrals. This is an accent color that stands out for sure, but it also seems to coordinate really nicely with the other neutrals in the palette. So the whole thing works together in a really streamlined fashion. But this palette wouldn't be complete without two trim color options. For your baseboards, your trim, and your woodwork, the first one is the light option, which is Cameo White. One of my favorite uber bright whites by Behr paint. It has this chalky quality, a little bit of gray, just a touch of brown as well to prevent it from feeling way too cold and frigid. And it's sitting at an 81 LRV, which is definitely the lightest color in this video, but still has just a little softness to it that I really enjoy, especially with any warmer leaning neutrals like the ones we've been discussing. That being said, if you wanted to go with a darker trim option, or maybe you wanted dark interior doors, which is getting really popular, black garnet would be my suggestion. And it's very loosely tied to Rule Breaker, where there seems to be this touch of a purpley quality in the background. I almost more so see it though as like a dark topsoil color. It's very earthy and organic feeling, even though it's very close to black essentially. It's a 6 LRV color, so it hardly reflects any light. It's going to be very contrasty, but that's kind of the goal, I think, if you're going with an off the beaten path trim color choice that isn't an off-white, which is this one. So here's the palette all together, a little more of a neutral feel this time around. Let me know what you think, and we got more right over here, just more. We all love more, don't we?